Good evening, folks. Welcome. We're just letting a few more people in, just 7 o'clock, so we'll just give it a couple more minutes. We'll probably still have a few more folks joining us, but so that we don't keep people, Dan, maybe I'll invite you to start us off.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Pathways to Funding Town Hall, hosted by Shining Waters Regional Council. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we're glad you're here, whether you're participating from your church, home, or wherever you are this evening. Navigating grants and funding opportunities can feel complex, and you don't have to do it alone. Our goal tonight is to support church leaders like you in making the most of the resources available to sustain and grow your ministry, with a focus on the upcoming fall program grants. My name is Dan Clark, and I'm honored to serve on the Grant and Mission Support Committee alongside some wonderful colleagues. Having reviewed many applications over the past years, I've been seeing firsthand how these grants are truly making a difference, from vibrant community outreach programs to innovative initiatives. It's been inspiring to witness the creativity and faithfulness happening across our region. I want to take a moment to thank JJ, our chair of our committee, for his dedicated leadership and guidance in this important work. We're also always looking for new volunteers to join the Grant and Mission Support Committee. It's a meaningful way to support ministry across Shining Waters. If you're interested, please reach out to JJ or Jody Maltby. Jody will walk you through the agenda, the timelines, and introduce our partners tonight, this evening. We hope this session brings you practical guidance and a sense of connection with others doing faithful ministry across our region. Thank you again for being here. I'll ask JJ to read the land acknowledgement.
Good evening and welcome, everyone. It's an honor to be here from people from many corners of our region. And as we gather, we know many people are on a range of different lands, but as we gather this evening, we acknowledge the sacred land of which each of us lives has been and continues to be home to Indigenous peoples for many thousands of years. They have sought to walk gently on this land, and they have offered assistance to the first European travelers to this territory and shared their knowledge for survival in which, well, at times, was a harsh climate. We seek new relationships with the original peoples of this land, one based in honor and deep respect. We strive to make this meeting and all meetings and gathering of Shining Waters Regional Council a safe space for people of all abilities, any sexual orientation and gender identity, racialized persons, and all others who are marginalized and have been excluded and harmed by the church. Miigwech.
Thank you to Dan and John Joseph for uh, opening us so well. I'm very pleased to welcome two guests who are sharing with us tonight. We've got Janice Meehan from Toronto United Church Council, or TUCC, and those of you who were here in March will have heard from her then, and so we're getting an update on the funding opportunities there. And we're also really pleased and grateful to have John Barr here from PTCC, which is the Presbyteries of Toronto Conference Corporation. And PTCC is another significant funding partner for Shining Waters. And so we're grateful that he's here to share a bit about their work. And I particularly want to express appreciation to both Janice and John because PTCC had their annual meeting today and TUCC has their annual meeting tomorrow night. So they are both really taking one for the team to be with us tonight, and we're very grateful. And so I am going to right away. So we'll hear from Janice first, then we're going to hear from John, and then at the in the last portion of the gathering, I'll talk about the Shining Waters granting cycle for the fall. So I'm going to invite Janice to share with us first.
Great, super. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for being here and thank you for having me. I'm going to share my screen. So thank you for having me talk about the grants that TUCC has available for the upcoming fall. First of all, just a broad overview. TUCC stewards 40 different funds, and right now it says 13, but we actually have 2 new funds for granting coming on in the fall. So we will have 15 that will be opening for various times throughout the year. And I would just note that we do receive approximately 75 plus applications in any given year for these grants that are open. And also that the other 27, if people are wondering what happens with those other funds, they have their grants go directly to other ministry projects, other missions, based on the terms of the gifting agreements that we have. So, in broad speaking terms, we have funds available this fall under 4 different categories: church development funds, camping grant funds, social ministry grants, and partnership grants. And so, as I noted, each fund really has its own terms and conditions, its guidelines, its eligibility criteria, and we have put these into downloadable PDFs for you to look over before you decide to apply for a grant. But all of these guidelines are based on the gift agreements or somebody's will, and we've been left a gift through the will, and they have certain criteria that we must follow in order to meet to be eligible to grant funds from their fund. So again, as I said, we have 4 different categories of support. Our church development grants support leadership development, ministry innovation. They also help to strengthen communities of faith. Our camping grants, we have 1 that's available, that's open for applications all across all the regions we serve. And this 1 camping grant is the Winston and Merle Roach Camp Leadership Grant Fund that supports Black youth leadership in the United Church camps across the regions, the 6 regional councils that we serve. This opens in the spring, but some people who may be interested in this should start to think about it in the fall as the camps start to wind down and close. So we have social ministry grants, and these support various outreach projects, justice initiatives, and community-based responses to very urgent local needs. We have partnership grants, which are here in Shining Waters Regional Council. They are the donor advisors through TUCC to the Toronto Southeast Presbytery Major Capital Fund, and you apply for this grant through Shining Waters. We also have the Peterborough Extension Council Fund grant, and that is a direct application through our website. And new this fall, as part of a partnership grant, it's really under our social ministries. It was a partnership with the Four Winds Development Corporation, and they closed and transferred their assets to us. But coming this September, we will be launching a new fund that will issue grants, and this is for healing and reconciliation projects, justice partnerships between communities of faith and Indigenous partners. And I'll be speaking a little bit more about that in the coming slides. So grants that are open now, and I want to also talk about briefly about our new process. So grants that are open now and that are open year-round are the Leslie and Anna Davenport Fund, and we issue grants of up to $5,000 per project for applications that come into us, and our Community Relief Fund. And the Community Relief is, you can think about it as immediate needs, out of the cold projects, those kinds of initiatives, immediate food, Meals on Wheels kind of services, hospitality, social outreach ministries that folks are doing. So these grants are open year-round, and you apply through a general application. However, on the social media grants page, each of these funds does provide granting guidelines just so that you can see the types of projects. And we do list every previous grant recipient of these funds and the projects that they have received a grant for. So you can see the types of grants that we fund. I want to mention that right now we are implementing over the summer a new software, that granting processing software package that will help us improve our granting process, and it will be up and running for September. So we are hoping, and we are assured by the vendor, that everything applying for grants will become much easier. And people can now fill out the application in draft form. They can go away, work out their budgets, come back to their application, and all sorts of good advantages with the new software. So that's about us. Now, 3 grants that are opening this fall, and to learn more about those grants, the fall grants open from October 1st to November 14th, and the first set are the church development grants. And the first one is the Douglas Very Fund grant. It's $5,000. And as it says here, it's paid to a community of faith or incorporated ministry that supports innovative ministry ideas. And this fund, Douglas Very, Reverend Douglas Very, was dedicated, of course, to fostering creative new ideas, inclusive ministries, mission-driven initiatives. And so the various guidelines and the application, right now, you can access it in preparation for applying for this grant. You can look at the guidelines, and the application is an online application process, which will change in the fall, but the guidelines are there, as well as previous recipients of this grant and the kinds of projects that we funded with this grant, that were funded by this grant, actually. Our next one that opens is the Peterborough Presbytery Extension Council Fund. And that Extension Council out in the Peterborough Presbytery, they also closed and transferred their assets to us. And we structured this fund with the Extension Council members as they were closing, and it's a $10,000 grant, and it is paid to communities of faith as well as incorporated ministries across all the regions we serve, including Shining Waters. And so we usually give out a couple of these grants in the fall, but each one is limited to a $10,000 grant, and they gave it wide scope. So it could be for innovative mission or ministry projects. It could be an Indigenous outreach project. It could be a community outreach project. Could be sustainability improvements to the building, to a program, technology improvements. We've given out a couple of these grants in the past for technology improvements that people wanted to make for streaming their services and various projects around technology improvements. So, as I've said, the application and the guidelines are available on our website under our church development grants for TUCC. And our new grant this fall is coming from our social ministry. It was a partnership, but we're sort of reallocating it under our social ministry grants, and it's brand new. And as I said, it's the Four Winds Development Corporation Fund. It's a $5,000 grant, and it too is paid to a community of faith or incorporated ministry in any of the regions we serve, which would include Shining Waters, communities of faith. And this is specifically to support initiatives that will promote truth and reconciliation and healing between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities, settler communities, church communities. So communities of faith that might be working in partnership with an Indigenous group, with an artist, or with an Indigenous creator on a substantial initiative. And what is here in the photo is Indigenous murals had been commissioned at Islington United Church, and they put forth an application previously to another fund that they were funded through, but this type of project would be ideal for this new fund, this new grant that's available. Islington United made their case that they are a neighborhood, Etobicoke is a neighborhood of murals. And so they had an Indigenous artist that they were partnering with, and they wanted to display, and they have about 6 across the building, outside the building, weatherproofed and everything, but they were working alongside that Indigenous artist and to create all the murals that are displayed on the outside of their building as part of their healing and reconciliation projects that they were working on. So that is coming this fall, and be on the lookout for that. So if you have questions or you want to learn more, I would suggest that you visit our grants page at tucc.ca. And there is a tab that says Grants and Awards. And if you click on that, you will find different categories of our grants and awards pages. And just explore the page. As well, on the Grants and Awards tab, we also provide a link and a page to many other grants that people may be interested in that we don't provide, but we've categorized them and we've given links to the Toronto Foundation, to Bell Media for mental health support, to the Lilly Foundation, to the Trillium Grant, to Ontario government grants, federal government grants. So our grants pages are the place to visit. If you have any questions or you just want to talk about, would my project be considered for a grant, let's have a conversation. I can be reached at the office phone number here and or by email, and we can just set up a time that is convenient for both of us to speak. And again, I would encourage everyone to review the individual funding guidelines and the eligible criteria. But if you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to let me know. And I'm going to stop sharing. And I would be happy to answer any questions about any of our grants or your project and how we might be able to help support your ministry. As well, my colleague Daniel Reed would like folks to know also that we do have loan funds available. So if you can't qualify for a grant necessarily, but you still have an idea about something, we might be able to provide the congregation, the community of faith, with a loan. And we want to be able to help support your ministry and your ministry ideas. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Janice, for all of that information. And it was a lot of very helpful information. So I'll just let folks know now that there will be a recording of the town hall available on our website. And I think we can put your slides up there too. That's correct, right, Janice? Yeah. Yeah. So you'll be able to go back and look again at the information. But just checking if anyone has a question that they want to ask now. Although, as Janice has said, you're very welcome to also contact her directly. So I'm just, if you have a question, you can pop it in the chat, or you can raise your virtual hand. I won't be able to see you if you raise just your real hand, but I'm not seeing any questions right now, Janice. If any come in after you leave, we'll make sure to get them to you so that you can respond to them. And then perhaps we'll make that information available on the website too, because if one person is interested, chances are we're all interested.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jody.
Thank you for coming.
Everyone.
So we're going to move on now to John Barr, who is with us from PTCC. Now, when I saw John this afternoon, he was the chair or the president of PTCC. John, I'm not sure if that's still the case.
No. I'm now the secretary.
Okay. Well, then I am very pleased to welcome John Barr, the secretary of PTCC, who's going to just share. It's one of our major funding partners, and so I just wanted folks to hear a bit about them. So I'll pass it to you, John.
I don't have anything, a visual presentation to share with you, but just a little information about PTCC. We've existed for about 50 years within Toronto Conference and now within Shining Waters and as well Western Ontario Waterways region. And we have one primary fund that is used by the Shining Waters region, which currently has approximately $8 million in it. And basically, the way it works is any dividends and interest and other distributions that we get from our investments are available for funding grants in the region. As well, we allow total grants of an additional up to 5% of the starting capital of the Shining Waters Fund. So for 2026, it was around $400,000. I think it was $393,000 was the number at the time. So we have that available for giving out in grants. So, for instance, in 2026, the Shining Waters Fund gave out $628,000 worth of grants from those net revenue and up to 5% of capital type grants. Any of the people, the communities of faith, camps, or other ministries that have received our grants, that can all be found on the PTCC website, which is ptccorp.org. So ptccorp.org is our website, and all of the previous grantees will be shown there. Typically, in Shining Waters, the grants are applied through Shining Waters region, not directly to PTCC, but through Shining Waters. And I believe in that, they come in the fall. I can't remember exactly what the deadline is for those applications, but they are looked at in the fall and decided on by the Shining Waters Grant Committee in the fall and passed on to us for further approval and so on. And new grants would come out next year in the first quarter of 2027. So we have been around for quite a while. We try to fund grants to the extent that we have money available and within our operating agreement with Shining Waters. Primarily, these grants are program grants, to deal with whatever programs are going on in the various communities of faith or the camps or whatever. And we hope to continue giving these grants out for as long as we can, and hopefully that will help a number of communities of faith within the region. I don't really have too much more to say at this point. If you do have questions, I'd be more than happy to try and answer them.
And we will be looking later at a list of the grant recipients for 2026, and we'll be able to see some of the ministry and projects that have been funded by PTCC. Yep. So if there are questions for John, I think for those of us who were active in the former presbytery structure within Toronto Conference, it's helpful to be reminded that that these ongoing partnerships still exist. I see Ken Clark has his hand up. Ken.
Thanks, Jody. Just a query as to, is there an actual cap on that dollar amount for the grant? Obviously, that we saw before through TUCC, but I'm just wondering, is there an actual top-up or level of grant that's available?
It is not a fixed cap. It changes from year to year depending on the amount of, the capital amount of the Shining Waters Fund, and our estimate of what the net revenue will be for the fund for that year. So in the fall, we estimate what our total net revenue would be, the dividends and interest and other distributions less our expenses, what that would be for 2026, and that will be available in 2027 as net revenue grants. And whatever the amount is of the fund that is in place at the end of 2026, 5% of that would be available. So it does vary a little bit from year to year, but generally we're in the range of $635,000, $635,000 in total for Shining Waters grants for the year. So I can't give you an exact figure, but it varies a bit.
And to that, John, is there a limit to the individual community of faith? I guess is more my query. Like, is there a top-up of 25 or 50,000, or does it depend directly on the application and the purpose and needs of that community of faith?
Well, most of it goes through the grant committee at Shining Waters, so it's primarily up to them to determine what the maximum amount would be. So
it's coming through the committee that we're involved with, I guess, directly, and the application comes through us directly. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The other thing I just want to mention to folks is, as part of our relationship with PTCC, Shining Waters recommends representatives to serve as both members of the corporation and as directors of the corporation. And we're actually recruiting for members because we don't have a full complement. So if you are interested in getting a better understanding of the relationship or the support for ministries that PTCC does, then I'd encourage you to reach out to me because I also support nominations, and we'd love to have some folks, some new faces get involved in this work. I would say, John, I think you'd agree with me. It's not onerous being a member, but it can be interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Just pausing to see if there are any other questions before we move on. I'm not seeing any. And again, if any come in after the fact, John, we can certainly make sure to connect with you to get the answers that we need. But thank you again so much for being with us and reminding us of that history that we share.
Okay.
So I'm going to now talk a bit about the upcoming funding cycle for Shining Waters Regional Council. So we had our new congregational funding program in the spring, and that went quite well. We had a number of applications, and we were able to make about $300,000 in grants, maybe slightly less than that, from that program. So that was a great first run for that. The cycle that we're entering into now, that spring program was just for congregations. So congregations within Shining Waters were the only folks who could apply for that. We're moving into our funding cycle for, we're calling it Communities of Faith. It is has a particular focus for camps, community ministry, missions, outreach, ecumenical chaplaincies. But those could be housed within congregations or communities of faith, or they could be separate, independent charitable organizations. I just want to give you a little bit of a history again. Shining Waters, the former structure of Shining Waters was Toronto Conference, and within Toronto Conference and the 4 presbyteries, we had a robust granting program at that time, but at least 10 to 12 years ago, that program did become closed. And so what that meant was that they no longer accepted new applications, new grant recipients. The applications could only come from pre-existing grant recipients. And so Toronto Conference had a number of ministries that they were supporting with their grant funds on an annual basis. And when we shifted into the regional structure, regions were asked by the General Council to honor the funding priorities of the former conference and presbytery for at least a minimum of 2 years. So Shining Waters Regional Council did that. And because so many of the ministries were quite dependent on the funding, and with the pandemic and a lot of the uncertainty that came from that, with food costs and generally the need for the ministry that these organizations were providing, we had not yet opened up this grant application process, although it was always the intent of the Grants and Mission Support Committee to do so. And so this is the first year that this is going to be an open granting process. So a little bit, we're testing the waters, seeing how it goes. We're going to get a lot of good learnings out of it. And we hope to continually improve the process going forward. But I do want to let you know that a lot of thought has gone into our granting programs in Shining Waters. And in 2021, the executive approved a framework for funding that's available on our grants website that came out of a year-long consultation with the executive, the commissions, the equity team, the Living into Right Relations Circle, and the Grants and Mission Support Committee, to try and determine what and how and why we do our funding. And so I'm just going to share my screen and just walk us through that a little bit. As I say, this is available on our website, and I would encourage folks to take a look at it. Can you see that okay? If I can see Ken. Ken, can you see what's on my screen?
A little small. Can we maybe increase the font possibly?
I can probably do that.
Thank you.
There we go. So this is our framework for funding. And it again identifies that our intention is to provide grants to camps and other programs for children, youth, and young adults, to community ministries, to ecumenical and interfaith chaplaincies, to Indigenous ministries and right relations, to missions, and to outreach ministries. And the region can consider other grant applications as well, if funds are available. But these are the areas of ministry that we have been focusing on. And I will just mention that particularly Indigenous ministries, they do have a separate model for receiving funding, and that is supported by my colleague Kim Uedekai, who's here on the call as well. So I won't be particularly talking about Indigenous ministries as part of this presentation. When we are looking at grant applications, we do focus on the priorities of the regional council that have been identified, and these include living in right relations with Indigenous peoples and responding positively and meaningfully to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, and the caretakers of our Indigenous circle calls to the church. Also, our commitment to becoming an anti-racist church, and our commitment to welcoming people of all ages, abilities, races, sexual orientations, and gender identities, and any other forms of marginalization. So these are commitments of Shining Waters Regional Council that you can find in our Regional Council policy. And so the Grant Submission Support Committee use those as a lens in considering grant applications. They also use the mission and ministry that is provided in the manual, and that's included as well. So the focus that came out of our consultation, we do prioritize funding programs that help us to become an intercultural church, camps and programs for children, youth, and young adults, supporting communities living with poverty, income inequality and homelessness, disability and aging, ensuring a strong United Church presence across the region, environmental programs, Indigenous ministries and right relations, innovative ministry to us and LGBTQ communities and minority ethnic culture communities and ethnically diverse communities. So the way that we, as a region, look at our granting program is that we offer both deep, which is multi-year core funding, and wide annual funding for specific projects or programs. Our multi-year core funding is a closed grant application process still. So we are not receiving applications for multi-year core funding. That is a funding model that is specifically for the community ministries that we are in relationship with. That does not mean that that will always be exclusive, but at this point we have a commitment that has been affirmed by the regional council at their regional meeting. So right now, that is a closed application process. However, the open application process is for projects and programs. And so these will be smaller annual grants for specific projects or programs. And where possible, there will be an expectation that these programs are going to move toward being self-sustaining. So these annual grants that we're offering are provided with the expectation that the project will become self-sustaining. So we're not looking to set up a grant for a particular program that is going to be repeated year after year after year. This is to help establish a program or a project with an expectation that there's a plan for other funding sources ongoing and sustainability. The other piece that I wanted to highlight is I do want to mention that there will be a finite amount of funds. We heard a bit from John about how funding is calculated for the funds available from PTCC. The funds we access from TUCC have a similar model that it's calculated on percentages. And then the remaining funds are approved as part of the Shining Waters Regional Council budget. So there is a specific amount, and in 2026, that amount was about $1.2 million. So it's a pretty significant commitment that the region is making to support this important ministry. But it does make it challenging to move into this new phase of our funding life, because we don't know how many grant applications we're going to get. We don't know how much organizations are going to be asking for, and we'll have to put the pieces of the puzzle together to make them the most faithful decisions that the committee can make. I also do want to highlight that by virtue of the priorities that we received when we moved into the regional structure, most of our grants up until now have focused on Metro Toronto. We do have the grants to the camps, and there is a chaplaincy up in the northern part of the regional council, but a significant majority of the funding has been focused on Toronto. And that is important and necessary ministry, but the committee is also really committed to trying to make more grants available in the northern part of the region, and particularly in rural areas. So I just want to lift that up. And then finally, just so that you'll know our funding sources, we do receive mission support grants from the Mission and Service Fund, and all of the grant that we receive in Shining Waters is used to provide grants in local community ministries. We receive the funds that John talked about from the regional fund at PTCC. We do have a Right Relations and Indigenous Ministries Fund, and that's the fund that Kim is able to offer support from. And then we have the St. Enoch's Fund and the Toronto Southeast Presbytery Major Capital Fund, both of which are housed at Toronto Conference. And then finally, as I mentioned, we do have an amount identified in our regional budget. I also just want to note that some of you will be aware that Shining Waters in 2024-25 went through a review of ministry and funding priorities for the regional council and made some decisions at a meeting in December of 2025. And the congregational funding program that we had in the spring was one of those decisions. But I also just wanted to let you know that the other piece, the second most significant priority that was identified in that review, and that review, just for anyone who wasn't part of it, that review actually included a pretty significant survey of congregations and our partners and our incorporated ministries. And then it also included an opportunity to give feedback on the directions that were coming out of the review itself. So the second most significant priority that was identified was this support to community ministries, outreach, justice initiatives. And these ministries, whether they're housed in congregations or independent charitable organizations, were felt to be integral to the life and identity of the United Church. And so as a region, we believe that these ministries are an important expression of who we are as a region, and that the work that happens there is the justice work of Shining Waters Regional Council, and that's why it's so significant. It's so important to us to fund as best we can. Okay, I want to just talk a bit now about the application process. I'm going to, I did want to just Well, no, I'll do the application process first. So I'm going to share my screen again. So the application for this new granting cycle is available for you on our website, on our grants and funding page. And I expect Kathleen will put the link in the chat if she hasn't already. And so you can look at the application form there. The applications are due into our office by September 15th. And you would send that to Kathleen directly, Kathleen Jones, and she'll put her email address in the chat as well. You are most welcome to reach out to me if you want to talk about a project or a program that you're looking to possibly fund, and I can talk with you a bit about the application itself. I will tell you it is a more complex application form, a more robust form than the congregational funding form. We heard very clearly that that process needed to be as simple as possible. And we want this process to be simple as well. But there are some more significant grants offered through this process. And so we want to make sure that we have a really clear understanding of the ministry and the program that's being supported. So when the grants are received by the Grant Submission Support Committee, the committee reviews all of the grant applications, and they will reach out to ministries to have conversations, to get a better picture of the ministry, to answer any questions or ask any questions that may have come out of the applications. And so that happens in October and November of this coming year. The committee then makes recommendations to the executive, generally in that first week of December, and then notifies grant recipients if their grants have been approved. If the grant is coming from PTCC, those applications are then forwarded to PTCC for their January meeting for their consideration. And so those grant recipients will be notified of that final step after that meeting. Any that are coming from the funds housed at TUCC are forwarded to them for their distribution. Any that are coming from mission and service funds are forwarded to the General Council, and they are paid directly from the General Council office. And those that are coming through the regional budget are paid through the regional budget. Most of these grants will be distributed quarterly. There may be some circumstances in which a lump sum payment would be given, but by and large, these grants come out in quarterly payments. And we'll ask for direct deposit information so that the funds can go directly into the ministry's bank account. Just thinking if there was something else I wanted to say about that. So I encourage folks to go and have a look at that grant application. We still have quite a bit of time before it's due, and we did this intentionally because we do want folks to have the opportunity to look at the application and to come back with questions if you have it, so that that you're able to provide the most full application possible to ensure success if possible. I also do want to just pop down to the bottom of this page because I did mention we'd talk about the grant recipients for 2026. And that was the other thing I wanted to tell you. Although the funding comes from a number of different sources, we have one application form and one application process. So you don't have to figure out which of those funds your grant should come from. You just fill out the application, and then the Grant Submission Support Committee, once the grants are approved, they figure out what's the best fit with which of the funding sources. So this just shows you the organizations that received grants in 2026. And you'll see here the grants that came from PTCC, and there's the grants that came from the Toronto Southeast Presbytery Major Capital Fund, which is the fund at TUCC. And so you'll also see really clearly here that some of the grants are going to incorporated ministries, separate charities, but some of them are programs of United Church congregations. We've got the Bloor Street United Church Refugee Program. We've got the Wesley Mimico Food Program. So it is open to both congregational outreach programs and separate ministries. And I also just want to remind you, I scrolled very quickly, but on this page, there are other grant opportunities that you can explore as well. And I'm going to talk about a few of the other grants that are available. So I've mentioned a couple of times now that our congregational funding program is closed. However, we do still have the application up for capital grants because we do have a little bit of money in reserve. If in exceptional circumstances where it would be a hardship to wait until next spring, applications will still be considered on an as-needed basis. So if your boiler goes out in November and you're going to be without heat for the winter, it's not reasonable to say wait until next June to get your grant. So we do have some opportunities for emergency exceptional circumstances. I also want to let you know that the United Church Foundation, and Sarah was with us at our March town hall meeting. The Fall Seeds of Hope granting cycle will open in July. So you'll want to go and check the United Church Foundation's website as well to see that grant opportunity. And Janice was telling me just before the meeting started that the New Horizons grant, which is through the Government of Canada, is currently open, but only until July 4th. So if that's a granting program, and I understand that this is a little earlier than it's been available in previous years. So if that's a grant that it's for seniors programming, if that's a grant that might work for you, you should get on that fairly quickly. So at this point, what I'm going to do is move on to some questions that were provided in advance, and then July 14th. Okay, that's helpful. So the New Horizons grant is actually July 14th, so you have a little bit more time. So I'll start with the questions that were sent in advance, and then we'll look at the ones that are in the chat as well. So the first question was, if a community of faith receives a grant under the Communities of Faith program grants for community ministries, camps, missions, and outreach. So the grant cycle that we are just starting for this fall, can they also apply for grants under the congregational granting funds next spring? So yes, you can apply for a capital grant, but not a program grant. It's one or the other for the program grants. So you can either apply to the fall cycle or the spring cycle. What is the start and end date of the grants, and are they limited to a specific time frame? So yes, the grants come from one of several funding sources, as we've talked about, and mostly they are distributed quarterly. So you would receive 4 equal payments over the course of 2027. Although, as I mentioned, a few smaller grants might be distributed in a lump sum. So the grant applications that are approved this fall, you will receive over the course of 2027. Are are there grants for community awareness events and projects to encourage new members to our church? So that hasn't been something that we have funded. Our funding framework does talk about vital ministry, innovative ministry, and the United Church Presence. So I think it would depend on the program. And also those might be appropriate program for the congregational funding for programs. It would need to be a very specific program that you were looking at funding, not just sort of generally to support our congregation. But it would need to be, this is a program we have to engage with the community. We had a question around staff training in mental health first aid. And I'm not sure that fits the fall cycle for Shining Waters. However, it might fit some of the programs that Janice was talking about earlier. Particularly, I was wondering about the Douglas Vary Fund. And also, I did notice on their website for external funding sources that there is a grant for mental health support programming through the Bell Let's Talk Community Fund. It's closed for 2026, but it will open again in the spring. And there are grants for job skills and training through the Employment and Social Development Canada. So I'd encourage you, if you're thinking about that kind of training, to look at the TUCC website, grants from other organizations and their grants program. Also, Shining Waters does offer small grants to support education for lay leaders. So that you could contact me about that if it's just a small program that lay leaders are wanting to pursue. Is there a fund specifically for preserving historical elements of buildings? For example, woodworking, carving, stained glass windows, etc. So not that I'm aware of within the church. And I, again, had a conversation with Janice about this before the town hall. And she wondered about the Toronto Foundation, which was formerly the Toronto Community Foundation, that they do sometimes give grants related to historical preservation. And other communities also have community foundations. So that might be a good place to look for that. She also said, stay checking the Government of Canada and Ontario grants websites, because that historic preservation piece could come up in other places as well, but not, as I say, I'm not aware of anything through the church. Is there a fund specifically for construction and renovation to support community outreach? I wonder about some of those funds that Janice was talking about for TUCC. The Peterborough Extension Fund was one that came to mind. But there are a couple of others on their website under the social, what is it called? Their social ministry fund as well, their social ministry funds. So I would encourage you to look there. I'd also note you could consider applying for a program grant and shifting some of your budget to support that capital work. If we, as specifically a church congregation, apply for a grant from one fund, are our incorporated ministries, for example, a drop-in center or a food bank, etc., eligible to apply for other grants? So yes, it's not. You couldn't both apply for the same grant for the same program, but you can both apply for grants if there is an incorporated ministry associated with a congregation. It can apply itself for the grants that we're talking about. We hold a number of significant investments which have been entrusted for specific uses. And so these are restricted funds, and they're actually for a specific project, the congregation that was asking about. But a number of congregations have restricted and designated funds. And so the question is, are you exempt from applying to any particular funds because of these holdings? And so generally restricted funds, funds that can only be used for a specific purpose, do not affect your eligibility to apply for grants. The General Council has their capital assistance program, and they have restrictions on how much you can have in unrestricted funds. I believe it's 37,500. But Shining Waters at this point does not have a restriction on how much, and the eligibility limit is a better word. I'm getting restriction is getting used too much in this sentence. Shining Waters does not have an eligibility limit based on unrestricted funds, and we don't have one based on restricted funds. Someone was asking about a maintenance contract for a chairlift. I'm not aware of any grants that are available for that. I appreciate that that's a significant expense, but the one thing that was, it's these grants are not specifically for operational expenses. They're for other funding, and so I realize that may feel unfortunate, but that is the case. A congregation that's asking about equipment. They're doing some shared worship through technology through a number of congregations, which is a great model that churches have found is quite effective. And so wondering about funding options to improve their filming equipment and their platform. So our congregational funding program, which will open again next spring, did provide some technology grants. So that's one opportunity. The General Council has a technology grant through their capital assistance. So if you go on the General Council's website and search capital assistance, you can find that. And I did notice that the Peterborough Extension Fund that Janice mentioned from TUCC also funds technology. So there are actually several opportunities there to support that. And then we had a couple of questions about specific programs, food security programs, outreach work, food ministry. So those are programs that would be eligible for the grants, the outreach grants that Shining Waters is going to be offering in this fall cycle, and would probably be eligible for some of the TUCC grants as well. So I do encourage you to look at both of those sources. I am going to look at what's in the chat now, and I see, do the Shining Water grants have specific dollar amount like the grants from TUCC? No. At this point in this program, we don't set a cap on the amount that you can ask for. But we do in the congregational funding program in the spring. The cap is $10,000. We haven't set a cap on these grants. In the application, though, there's an opportunity to provide your financial statements and also to indicate other sources of income. Shining Waters is not going to be able to fund a program in its entirety. So, I mean, we do have grants that range from just a couple of $1,000s up to 20,000 to we have some that are 50 to 100,000. We're probably not going to be able to make those kinds of grants in an open granting program. So you need to ask for what you genuinely need, but you need to also have a plan for if you don't get that full amount, how you'll be able to fund the program. we're not seeing the list. Oh, I see Kathleen shared the list. Thank you. Sorry that that you couldn't see that. And the confirmation of the deadline. So I have thrown a lot of information at you. If there are other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or also you can raise your virtual hand. And I encourage folks to also reach out to me. I know that Kathleen has put my contact in the chat, but I'm going to put it in again. It is best, if possible, to reach out to me by email, and then we can set up a time to chat. My days do get fairly scheduled, and so it's easier to do that. And I also want to remind you again that this town hall is being recorded, so you will be able to see it again on the website. And I just really encourage you to look at both our grants and the grants that are available on TUCC, which I'm just going to put in the website here, and then or in the chat. And I'm going to go back and put in the page for ours as well, and the United Church Foundation, because all of us have active grants coming up this fall. I am not seeing any more questions, but I don't want to rush anyone. So I'll just pause for a moment. So I'm not seeing any. I hope that that's because I've explained it all so well, but I expect it's because I have overwhelmed you with information. So just a reminder, as you work your way through it, please reach out with your questions. We want to make this process as accessible as possible. I am going to invite John Joseph to close us with a blessing, and thank you all so much for coming.
Yes, thank you one and all. And it's been a journey. And I also offer to be a concierge of sorts. So if people have further questions, because there's a lot of information that was shared tonight. And it's a great honor to be here with everyone. And also great news to hear about Peterborough coming on board as we expand our region. And as we prepare our time to close, let us pray. God, we move to this moment of great solstice for many First Nations Sunday. And as we remember the gifts of our First Nations brothers and sisters, may we continue to celebrate all they offer. And as we also walk in this Pride Month, where we look at the range and diversity that is part of who we are as people of the church called together, we celebrate the gifts that we all bring and the strangers we are meeting and the doors that are opening. In your name we pray, now and always. Amen.